I have.
Madam Chair, we're live.
Okay, at 5:04, I will call to order the regular meeting of the Finance Committee, and if we could get a roll call, please.
Certainly, Madam Chair. Councillor Cassett.
Here.
Councillor Lindell. Councillor Faulkner.
Did we get a Zoom? You see you're on Zoom?
Yes.
Okay,
everyone's here.
If our IT people, can we get the monitors in the chamber turned on? And then Councillor Faulkner, can you hear us? Is she?
She's not on the Zoom.
Oh, I thought you said she was. I'm sorry.
I don't see her on the Zoom.
Okay. All right. Well, she's excused.
Councillor Lee Garcia.
Here.
Chair Romero Worth.
I am here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
All right. So we'll keep an eye out for Councillor Faulkner. She may join us, maybe having Wi-Fi issues. Okay. With that, we will go to approval of the agenda. Do we have changes to this agenda tonight?
No, Madam Chair, no changes.
Is there a motion? Move to approve. We have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? That motion passes. I believe there were a couple of things pulled off consent, if I'm correct.
Madam Chair, one item was resolved, so we only have one item removed from consent. That is item 6E.
All right. And is there anything else the committee wanted to hear? And if not, is there a motion?
Move to approve as amended.
Motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as amended. All those in favor, aye. Anybody opposed? That motion passes. Okay. From there, we have two presentations tonight. The first one is our audit update from Director Oster.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. We are entering the review stage, which is wrap up, closing pending items, and preparing for our submittal of the FY23 audit report by May 15th to the State Auditor's Office. That is my update for this evening, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Yes, Councillor Lee Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Director Oster. So submittal by May 15th and expected, when do we usually hear back from them, or what's the process?
Madam Chair and Councillors, Councillor Garcia, once we submit it to the State Auditor's Office, they start their review process, and there's some back and forth that happens. In the case of the FY21 audit, that process took us about a month. The audit was released on July 31st after being submitted on June 30th. For FY22, it took a little bit longer because it was their busy time of year. So we submitted on December 7th and it was released on January 18th. I would say between 4 and 6 weeks would be my estimate for when it'll be released to the public.
Thank you, Director. Just kind of getting a timeline bearing and seeing where we're at. I think at this point, they're not as backlogged with other audits to review. So hopefully it'll be a little sooner and we'll be back in business. Thank you very much.
Other questions from the committee? All right, thanks for the update. Our second presentation is a utility billing modernization project update. We have Director Dupuy, I think, is en route, and we have Carla Monroe, who is the program manager, and our outside consultant. Looks like we also have Nancy Jimenez. We got a full team here. We did hear this presentation at the Public Works Public Utilities Committee. I think it's important enough, and it has a financial angle, of course, that this committee also hear this presentation. So thank you for being here tonight, and I'll let you kick it off.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, so as long as the green light is on, I think it's on, and just try to speak into the mic so we can generally hear you in the chamber, but for the streaming purposes, if you're not talking through the microphone, you're basically silent.
Thank you. So good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I am here today to talk to you, give you an update on the modernization project for the utility billing. And the reason I'm here today is because you all engaged with an IVNV vendor to look at the project because it had been ongoing for 10 years to provide some insight as to why the project was ongoing and unfinished. I'll start off with just giving a little bit of information about, just in case you don't know what an IVNV vendor is, I'm going to share that. So what that is independent verification and validation. And what they're verifying is that the requirements are the actual requirements that are needed. And then what they're validating is that you actually use those requirements to build a system. So that's what the assessment was for. One of the first things that came out of the assessment is there was not a full-time program manager or project manager. And they suggested that you get a program manager, and that was me. And I'll give you a little bit of background on me. So I have been a project manager for 25 years. I've worked in state government, local government, school districts. As project managers, I've also worked for system integrators, the person that's actually developing and implementing your system, as project managers and program managers. I have also 20 years of process improvement. And the reason that is important because it helps you the skill set to dig down to root causes and figure out why things are not working and what's working. And then what are some of the tactics we could use to get everything on target. So I have 20 years experience. I'm a Lean Six Sigma Black Belt. I also have my PMP. I have multiple methodologies that I'm certified for project management. And I'll tell you why that's important when we start looking at the different areas that IVNV pointed out. The other area that I have an area expertise in over 10 years is organizational change management, which is one of my passions. And so that's looking at when you're implementing something new, you have to look at the staff and how they relate to that, how management relates to that. And in your case, how your customers relate to your new system, and resistance management, because one of the things that will pop up in any, and this is not just Santa Fe, this is any place, you're going to run into resistance when you try to put in something new for everyone to use. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of information on my background. Do we have the presentation?
Madam Chair, I can bring it up and I can share that.
I was going to, just so people can see what I'm reading and refer to it.
Yeah, no, that's totally possible. And we don't need to have, Counselor Faulkner will not be able to join us because of bad Wi-Fi connection where she is. So we can just replace what's on the screen with the presentation.
And I can read it also. Okay.
No, I think it's helpful to have the visuals and we do that.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'm just pulling it up right now. I should be able to share it in just a moment.
No worries.
While we're bringing it up, if you want me to, I can start talking to the slide. And because it's going to give you high level, I'm going to give you a lot more detail as we talk through it. So one of the root causes, well, some of the root causes for the delay was dealing with business process documentation, data conversion, and then organizational change management. So when we start and we talk about business process documentation, the reason that is important because that is one of the foundational tools that you use in building your requirements. If you don't know how you do work, how can you document for a vendor your to-be process, right? And then it's a crosswalk from what we do today to where we want to be. And if you can't tell them where you are today, it's pretty difficult to know where you want to be. And telling them where you are today is where you build your business requirements. And so when we did some research,
And just as a point of information, is this a presentation in the packet on PrimeGov? It is.
Yes, Madam
Okay,
Chair.
all right, just want to make sure the public can access it if they want to. Thank you.
And there's only one additional slide from the,
Okay, terrific, but we're gonna see it here in the chamber, so that's great.
I think we're 2 slides. So, like I said, the business process documentation, but what we've been doing since we started doing this, investigation and to address these deficiencies is that we started having business process, training for staff. The first training happened last month. It went very well. There were, the majority of the staff were from the, public utilities, but there were also staff from finance and there were staff from IT and HR, because some of the processes reach into different areas, upstream and downstream. And if you're going to start documenting and taking requirements, you want to make sure that you include the upstream and downstream, and so that people are trained and versed in that as well. The other area was data cleansing, and you'll see on when we get further into the slide, that was one of the areas that IVNV said were yellow, but we actually turned it to red after doing the investigation and looking at the data conversion and the issues with conversion. It was a little bit more, there were more issues there than they were able to pull out in that initial high level review by the IVNV vendor. And the other thing is organizational change management with a focus on customer engagement and satisfaction. With the billing system, right, we want to start looking at how we can engage with customers because they're going to use the system as well. What are some of their requirements, right? What are some of their issues? We hear a lot about the issues that the customers have, but we need to actually have some focus groups, some just inviting them in and talking to them and say, okay, what exactly are some of the issues? What are some of the things that we can provide? We hear like an IVR, right, with your billing system. And they actually call in and get a person to answer the phone. Or maybe they just want to know how much is my bill, and they can do that in an IVR. They don't really need to have a human touch for that. But Santa Fe has an older population. They may want a human touch for that, right? And you may want to do that, but some people might not. So how do you gather those requirements? And those are different. Those are customer requirements. How do you gather those customer requirements and use that in your billing systems? So those were some of the areas that we identified that we're currently working on right now before we actually restart the project to have that foundation in place. So I'm going to go back and talk about data, the data cleansing part. So if you have data that you don't really need and you're populating in the system, there is a lot with that. You're going to take up space that you don't need. You're going to have additional information that you don't need. You're trying to figure out where to actually locate that data in your new system. So actually looking at the data, saying these are the elements that we need. We don't need these other elements. So why are we bringing over? And then looking at it, are there some elements that we don't have that we might actually need that we need? Because finance may need some information. And it's easy if you bring that data in, you can provide them a report without having the data. And one of the requirements we do know is that whatever system we're using, it has to speak Munis, and it has to speak with Munis in a way that's automated and not something that's updated manually. So from the IVNV report, we had a couple options and we looked at option 2. If we can everyone see that?
Think we
Yeah,
can.
I'll talk through it. So
Yeah,
option
no, we have it.
Yeah, okay. So option 1 was project continuation. Just keep the project going. Don't stop anything because you have you have momentum. Know that there are unknowns. But the risk with that was you would have to have a sole source contract with Advanced, who is the current vendor, and you would have staffing constraints that would delay the project. The second option that the IVNV said, we'll put the project on hold, do an RFP. We actually have a hybrid. I'll tell you what we came up with. Complete an RFP, not rewarding a vendor for poor behavior, right? with a sole source contract. The benefit could be starting from scratch if you needed to and adding all of that. They call it guardrails, but putting that foundation. And then the key risk is loss of years of investment. But at 10 years, right, are there new requirements? At this point, you might have some new requirements you might want to run. So you might not lose out on that investment. Well, what we did was, we chose option 2, but option 2 with a caveat. So you don't necessarily have to go to RFP. There are other procurement mechanisms that you can use that won't include 5 to 6 months. And we've been working with Travis on identifying, the chief procurement office, and identifying other procurement options that we. So it's kind of an option 2A. And one of the questions that was asked in the previous meeting was how much money had been spent thus far on the utility billing system. So if you look, you can't see it because verbiage there, but the total is $5,728,638, approximately as of November of 2020.
Let me just ask IT, is it possible to move the box over that scrolls the there we go. Awesome. Thank you.
And I'll break this down because this came up a couple of times, so I want to make sure that we go through this a little bit, and this is the finance committee. So Advanced Harris, they have been working on a project for multiple years. What you guys have paid so far is $1,617,866. But they were approved for $2,270,878, but they didn't finish the project, right? Or it wasn't satisfactory, the work that was done, so they weren't paid the full amount that was allocated. And then we also have Mountain River, who provided UCIS system support and non-system support or business level support. So over the multiple years for the system support, it was $1.3 billion, as you can see. But for the non-system support, more on the business side of utilities, it was 2.27, so almost $3 million. We also had the IV&V vendor. They were allocated $500,000, but what you guys spent was $54,568. And then the IT Connect contract is my contract, as well as business analysts work with me, was $114,768. And then there was a project management company very early on in the project that was engaged to provide project management services in 2015, and that was $368,730. I'm not sure of the process, but can I ask if there are any questions?
I think what we'll do is we'll just, if somebody has a question that's super burning, they'll jump in, and otherwise we'll just let you finish your presentation, and then we'll see if there are any questions after. So thanks for checking in on that.
So when we go back into the strategy of how we can complete the foundational work prior to implementation, and it's process-based, that process documentation I was telling you about, based requirements gathering, which involves documenting the current and future state of utility building process. We're currently underway with that. And I want to give a kind of a real world example of like why that's important. So let's think about you're building a house, and you have your old house, get an architect, and say, oh, I wanted my old house and I want these other things. You get to your new house and you're doing your walkthrough and you're walking through and you're like, oh, this is so pretty. But where do I press the button for my radiated floor? And the builder's like, what radiated? And you're like, the radiated floors I told the architect I wanted. You were like, oh, we didn't put that in there. We didn't have that requirement. So you have to dig the floors up. But the radiated floors underneath, you know how much money that costs, right? And how much time you lose. Then they go ahead and do that. You come back 2 months later and you're like, oh, these radiated floors look so good. Everything looks good. But it's nighttime. Where's my natural light? Like, where am I? Because I was there last time at nighttime. It's daytime now. Where are my skylights? And I'm like, you didn't have skylights as a requirement. So that's kind of what was happening with advanced, so there's a process and you have to have a certain skill set. And it's not that everybody didn't want to do the best job, because everybody did want to do the best job in doing these interviews. But there's a process and a method to taking requirements and getting that information on paper and then relaying that to your vendor, right? So I like to tell Nancy it's the no blame zone, but now we know the things that we have to use to make sure that project is successful. I hope that example made sense. The next slide. This is one, staff development. So staff development includes training and performance and achieving. We're talking about excellence awards, but also addressing job impacts as it relates to implementing a new system. And sometimes without training, staff work really, really hard. And I like to give real world examples. I give you an example. I had a meeting here on Friday. I can't parallel park to save my life, right? That was the only park that was out there. And I was so frustrated because I didn't want to be late. All my friend, I was like, I keep pulling the car in, it won't go in. And she was like, Carla, trust me. Go up to the car in front of you, line the wheels, and you can back in. I was like, that makes no sense. If I can back in, I can go in forward. She was like, no, trust me, right? Trust me. And I was like, no, I'm gonna be late. I'm just gonna go find another car. Like, take a minute. I pulled the wheel up. She said, I cut your wheel. I don't know what cut your wheel means. It's like, turn the wheel this way, right? And I backed into that spot. And I was thinking about that last night. I was like, that's how people work sometimes. We know what we know, and we try to do what we do, but we don't know the process and the method. So that's why we can't be successful. It's not that we're not working hard, because I was working hard putting that car in there. But I just, sometimes you just have to follow the process. And you can't follow the process if you don't know them, right? So that's why we want to have, and John is really having a lot with the process training, project management training, and organizational change management training for staff so that they can make sure that the project is successful going forward. That's another. The next is actually engaging, and we talked about this a little bit, with your customers, right? How are we going to get customer requirements? We can do surveys. I like surveys, but I like the in-person talking to customers a lot better, because you find out things in person that you don't find out on paper. And they'll tell you so much more when you engage in a conversation and they start to trust you. They'll give you a lot more information. Okay, well, let me tell you what's wrong. When I try to come in, I can't pay this way, or I want to pay this way, or why do I have to come into the desk? There's some states where you can go to the bank and pay your utility, right? As you're doing your banking, they won't even charge you a fee. So just some of the things that they may tell you, right, from living other places or engaged in or when I pay some other fee with the county, I can do it this way. And a lot of that information we can gather for the utility billing, we can gather it in person. So that is one of the foundational things, even on other projects when I do that are customer facing or have a customer facing module, is to get information from your actual customer on what they may. I'm not going to ask for any questions because we're going to wait to the end. That's just my natural.
Trust me, if there are questions, these guys aren't shy. They'll jump in.
Some of the other things that are worth mentioning is that we can change ordinances, resolutions, policies, those type of things. And John has, said, okay, that's what we can do. Because sometimes you'll ask, well, why are we doing things this way? Well, we always did it that way. Or there's some obscure policy from 1954, right, that you're following that you don't actually have to follow. And those things can be easily changed. It will make the process go a lot better. And it's not just changing it on the fly, right? It's actually meeting with policy folks, meeting with legal, meeting with everyone and going through the process, right? But even looking at that so that you can make the process better and not being constrained by if it's an ordinance. The other thing is we're also gathering requirements on other areas. So there's a lot of money coming into public utilities, not just utility billing department. They have money from the ACD and AMH, and I'm gonna mess this up a little bit, but I'm gonna try. So it's like water rights, when you have I've never heard of this being from Florida where water is plentiful, right? That you actually have to have the rights to water so that you can have water on your property. But they bring in quite a bit of money and they don't have an organized system as well. But we want to do it in phases because we don't want to stop what's currently on the table, right? So first finish what we have and then have a next phase with the chemicals, because BDD, they don't have a system either, but they take in quite a bit of money with chemicals. And their fear is the same as the water rights. So we're missing money sometimes, right? Because it's manual. So if it could be in a system, that would be great. So talking about a phase 2 after the initial implementation. So this is actually a topic areas from the IVMV report. So project management was one. And again, people are working really hard, but there was a part-time project manager for this project that probably, to be in fairness, should be a full-time project manager and a coordinator helping out. But there was actually a half-time project manager. So that was a lot of work for one person to try to do in 20 hours per week. So it was so like we're in a no blame zone, right? But we know now that for this type of project, this is what the staffing needs to look like. And we worked on the staffing, and that will be coming. I'll get to that in a minute. But so now that we have all we have the plans we've written, have them in place, whichever vendor we select, or if we still go with advanced, we'll still have to revisit all of those plans and go through them, and everyone would have to agree to the process. Like we have a risk management plan. When I was looking through the prior documentation, there was a one-page risk management plan, which is something I've never seen in my life. With risk management, you want to look at every single thing that could potentially be a risk. Like it's best to have 100 risks than having 0 risk, right? Does that mean you've looked at everything 360 degrees? You've looked at it and said, this could be a risk, but if this risk is realized, what do we want to do about it? You have a strategy to address it. And then for the ones that you rated really high, not only do you have a strategy, but you have a plan. The strategy is very high level. Like if we should realize this risk, you know, it might cost us $10,000. We'll figure it out. But if this risk happens, it'll cost us $100,000. So we better have a plan for that right now. And then also with issues like there were not current, you have to have issues meetings, especially with this type of project, at least once a week, where you're going over issues. You've assigned those issues to an owner. You've escalated those issues if they haven't been resolved. And so some of those processes weren't in place. And again, you did have a half-time project manager that was doing the best that he could. I won't go through everything. I'm just going to go pick up some of the high-level ones, but the quality management is really good. That's testing. So you have to have people that can test and focus on tests and document the test and report back. But full-time staff had full-time jobs, and they were on top of their full-time jobs trying to test. So going forward, we will not have that. We will have full-time testers that are testing, and they can bring that information back to the full-time staff, because full-time staff actually do a UAT test at the end, but they're not trying to test all the way through the project. And there's a way that you can do that where you can get them for 25% of the time, and they can sit with the testers as they're running. I wanted to pull that out because that one's very important. And then change management. Change management is training. It is resistance management. It is making sure that everyone is aware of what's coming. Because sometimes when you put in new, especially technology projects, staff will feel like, oh, I'm not going to have a job, right? Something is going to happen in my job. So who's communicating that? No, you might change a little bit, but there will be jobs. It might be a little bit different, but we'll set up training because we know that, even though you do X today, you may do Y tomorrow, but you'll be trained on Y well before you have to, switch over to Y. So the change management, we have a plan for that now. And then the change control, that was another one that was really important. Every time you make a change, it needs to be documented, whether it costs or not, because it changes your system, right? It changes something. So a lot of times you'll say, oh, that's just a quick change. We can do it on the fly, but you don't know what the ramifications of that change is. And later when if something else fails, and they're trying to figure it out and get to the root of it, they can't do it because they don't know it wasn't documented because it didn't cost them. So some of that was some of the issues. And so this is a future state timeline. If we were to continue what we're doing today, see that very well, so. So we've already reviewed the project plans that were existing, worked on a recovery plan, through the first quarter of this year. Last year, we retested dev tickets. I will tell you, after we started retesting, after we put some of these, safeguards in place, the testing, I think, had gotten up to like 85 or almost 90% accuracy. And that's what happened, like when you have your plan in place and you can follow through. Previously, the testing was maybe 20%, or it was, sometimes this would work in this category, sometimes it wouldn't. But once we started putting, okay, this is what we want to see, this is what the plan looks like, the testing it got much better. But it's just the fact of having a foundation. So what we're doing right now is doing business process training, and we're documenting processes. We've looked at other systems. We looked at Tyler, their utility billing system. We looked at a number of systems. We looked at other municipalities that had Advanced, that had Tyler, see what were some of the issues, right? Because we don't want to make the same, want to have the same concerns going forward. We want to kind of just do as much due diligence as we could, and we've done that. And we had a system that we really liked. I'm just going to say the name, SNA. They were really good, but they came back and said, we don't really do business right now in New Mexico, Colorado, Arizona. They had quite a few people reaching out to them. And they said, and we don't want to take on something we know we won't do well. Which I really like. That means they're not chasing money, right? They're saying and they have a very high customer satisfaction rate, standard. And so we understand that. But the other thing is, we've been speaking with Advance, working with Advance, getting better with them. I know that some of the potential questions will be, well, if they fail so far, why would we engage with them again? But I think what really happened is that we just didn't have the process in place, right? And we didn't have, and a lot of things too, you say for the end of the project, I know some of it was during COVID and they were trying to do things remotely that you normally wouldn't do remotely. So we've been working through some of those challenges and documents. I do have some numbers, and they're not exact, so I didn't share them, of going forward in timeline. So I have some numbers for if we finish with Advance, it would take a year. There would be some risk, and it depends on what the appetite for risk are, because they would start with where they are right now. It is kind of like rehabbing a house, right? You know, HGTV, when you look at them, they go, oh, $300,000 and I can redo my home. Oh, it's exciting. And they talk all the things they're going to do. And the first day they knock down a wall, there's mold, right? You don't know what you don't know when you start midstream. But we also were speaking with them, what if we started over, right? New requirements, having everything. So it would be a little more than double the cost, and it would be double the cost, and double what they would cost. But in the starting from fresh, they would actually do all of the data conversion, and they would include all of the IV and VI.
Great. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you for the examples. I think it helps some of what you're telling us, which, you know, is not what we spend our days doing, but really happy to have people like you who can look at where we are and what we've been doing and how we do it and how we fix this long-standing problem that we've had. And I think the examples help with some of the descriptions you gave. So I appreciate that. Do we have questions from the committee on this? Oh, come on. Oh, sorry. Councilor Lee Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you so much for the presentation. And again, I think that when you take a look at any type of project or project management, or even any organization, and I like to study operations management and so on. And when you take a look at any breakdowns in your systems, usually people or processes. And how do you identify that? And I did like your example of utilizing of saying, okay, you did everything, here's your finished product, and now they came back and it's like, oops, we forgot something. This wasn't looked at. And in what you presented here, it seems as you are utilizing best practices, and making sure that you are crossing your Ts and dotting your Is. And so I think that what what you talk about in regards to, and we're talking about the billing implementation, correct? And how does new technology relate to customers? And I think that identifying the fact that not everybody is going to be technologically savvy. Some people still like to get that bill in the mail. You probably even write a check, or there's some that even come into the office and pay with cash because I don't even know if money orders or cashier's checks. I mean, cashier's checks for sure, but money orders are, and there's all of these ways, and there's a portion of the people who, they're just set in their ways and aren't going to be coming to pay. So people and processes, and then actually answering the question as to the why, and I really like that, is why do we do this? When you train, people need to understand and know what the reason is that they're doing it. I do want to go back to that slide number 6, which shows the approximate project cost. And so 5,728,638 is to date of what we for November.
I will tell you that I've been working, even when we were going back and forth and looking at all the different companies, we were working with IT information.
Can
We
you
will-
talk into the mic? a
Oh,
little
I'm
bit? Your-
sorry.
Your voice got soft.
So as we were working and putting these numbers together, and working with IT quite a bit, with Eric Candelaria, the IT director, and Audrey Abeda, the PMO director, they were helping us pull together numbers from some of the technology side. So we do have those numbers, but I know that quite a few people, I didn't really want to reach out to finance for more recent numbers because I know they're working on audit things. So this is what we compiled as of 11/23. So when we put forth our proposal and contracts for going forward, we'll include the numbers as of that date. And by that time, we should have a little more time to reach out to finance and work with them to get more current numbers.
Thank you. So obviously it says multiple years on the first two rows, not columns, rows of that slide. And do we have can you tell us when we kind of started this? What year?
Off that question. I apologize for my attire. I just drove back, so I ran to the meeting. But so this project originally started November of 2013. So it has been, these numbers are 10 years worth of costs. And like Ms. Monroe said, we will be updating those from theoretically December of 23 until current. I wouldn't say that there's much more that needs to be included other than a couple of months worth of the old IT company, Mountain River. So that 1.3 million for UCIS support will more than likely go up for about 6 months. I believe it was March of 2024, I believe, is their last contracted invoice. So that could be up a little bit. Shalom is done at this point. IT Connect will have some additional costs. Schaefer and Associates is completed. And of course, because there has been a pause from Advanced, that dollar amount right now is current, and those won't change. So Mountain River and IT will be the additional costs added and updated to those numbers.
Thank you. And again, I'm just kind of focusing on those top two rows, and you add that up, 2, 3, 4. little over $5 million. And so, since 2013, that's I spread it out, but it doesn't seem like we made any traction with that. And, you know, to, Ms. Monroe, correct? And IT Connect, I think that, feel a lot more comfortable at this point. And so, you know, I just to bring it out there, there's always going to be that potential for, especially in your design stages or your research and development and so on and so forth, but a lot of money. And so I really, really appreciate these numbers. Don't like them, but at the same time, let's get this going. And I really want to be focused on where we're going to be as quickly as possible. But again, making sure that we are looking at every possible aspect of what we're needing to give the best possible customer service to our city, to the residents. I think that's the biggest point that I wanted to make off of this. I do want to ask in regards to, once we go to RFP, is advance, I think I'm jumping back to your slide, number 12. And so if we go to RFP, the implementation will be extended, but so does that mean that we would possibly look at other options in contractors for other softwares?
Yeah, so RFP normally takes about 6 months to get it all written and advertised, and then get the companies to bid, and then have those meetings. And there are a couple of different procurement methods that we're working with Travis, the procurement officer, and I'm sorry, I'm losing his last name right now. Emily might be able to help.
Madam Chair, it's Travis Dutton-Leda.
Thank you very much. So yes, with him being the procurement officer, he has several other possible procurement avenues that we can look at and hopefully speed up that RFP process. Because if you add 6 months to a projected 2-year project, you're looking at close to 3 years, unfortunately, before we can get a billing system. So now that we hope the right people in place, and a good foundation, and we are hopefully moving forward quickly but accurately, and then we will make the determination on the RFP. I'm hoping within the next month we'll have that determination whether we are doing an RFP or what other avenue we would be going down.
Going back to that is advance. We spent 1.6 with them. We approved 2.2. I'm assuming we're not going to continue giving that.
No, that contract has expired, so we would have to either through the RFP process or through a different procurement avenue, we would have to create a brand new contract with a new dollar amount, time frame, and all of those milestones and everything would be in the new contract. So the 2.2 obviously was not paid. The 1.6 was. So for utilities, that difference, that about 600,000 actually goes back into the cash balances within the 3 divisions, since we did not spend that 600,000.
And the 1.3 and the 2.2 was expended.
That was expended, yes.
And what was that? What were the services that we received for that?
So Mountain River was, in fact, technically our ITT department for the last several years. Again, not to belittle or talk bad or anything, there just wasn't the expertise in the IT department in-house through the city, employees or directors or, or anything like that. So we did have to have a contract with Mountain River, who is the IT technical support that was missing from a city department helping utilities. We did have to have a contracting company, and that's what is. Mountain River did the non-UCIS support is what they assisted with conversion, some other items during the advanced project for those 10 years. And the 1.3 million really is the back end of our UCIS billing system. So if a report did not happen the way we expected it, if the proof didn't bring what we expected of, say, like 13,000 accounts on a Thursday night, those hours would be asked of Mountain River to assist in the current system so that we can bill accordingly and correctly to all of our current customers each month.
Is our direction gonna be, because obviously you mentioned Munis and how that ties into our financial correct reporting and our finance department. We're hopefully gonna make sure that everything ties in.
Correct, yes, absolutely. It will be one of the requirements that's either set out in the RFP or in one of the other procurement avenues. That will be one of the larger requirements, that it does speak to, upload, however technical that needs to be, and however the information gets from the billing system into Munis financials, absolutely.
Thank you. And so just to go back and hopefully not repeat mistakes, or maybe we can forecast and foresee what could be some potential issues and make sure we don't go there. So those are all the questions I have. Thank you so much. I appreciate the breakdown of this money, because it's obviously it's taxpayer dollars and they don't like to see us wasting it. And so, I do appreciate the presentation and continue to see where we're at. Thank you so much. No more questions there, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Lindell.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question on the City of Santa Fe decision point, option 1, option 2 slide. Yeah. Option 2, key risk. First of all, I appreciate the way that this is presented, because knowing what the benefits are and what the risks are important. The risk I'm curious about under option 2 is limited timeline to implement new vendor before AS400 sunsets. Let's talk about how risky that is and what our odds are.
Yes. I would be glad to answer that, because we do have, we're working with the IT department, and the IT director is already looking at a contract to get support. So that's one of the risks that is low right now, because potentially they have a support to support the AS400 system. And then they're also looking to bring in a contractor and hire an employee to be able to support and have that type of knowledge.
Okay,
So that has been on the radar for quite a while.
thank you. I also very much appreciate that under key risk, it acknowledges the detrimental effect on core team members' morale. This has been a slog. And at times, at finance committee meetings, it's been less than pleasant. And when I say that, I mean that hard questions have been asked, and staff has had to answer some very, very hard questions, and it hasn't been easy on them. And I appreciate that we're acknowledging that this isn't going to be easy either, because we have a great staff and they work hard, and these are hard decisions to make that we know are a little demoralizing for the amount of time that people have put in on these projects. So I do appreciate that that is called out as one of the key risks, because it's important that we acknowledge that this isn't easy for staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Cassett.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you for the presentation. Really do appreciate, I think, everything that my colleagues have said is accurate, both the challenges and looking at, what the timeline has been, what the timeline is going to continue to need to be, as well as the, funding. I did want to go back a little bit to, kind of coming off of Counselor Lindell's discussion around staff. You did mention some new staff members, and I've heard support in ITT, support in public utilities. So I just want to have some clarity around where we are looking at the need for more city staff and what that recommendation is looking like, because I feel like I've lost that train of thought a little bit.
I didn't really touch on that as much as I will when we come back with the new contract. So that has been a conversation that Nancy and I have had. I do spend a little bit of time watching past committee meetings. And I know that some of the questions on various committee meetings where you have all these contractors coming in, right? Or how are you building the capacity internally for staff to be able to continue to work when the contractors are gone? Because my job should be to work myself out of a job, right? So in our new contract, when we start up, we have a clause in there for 20% of my time is to be working and helping staff develop. But that does require the city to have the staff, right, for me to help mentor and coach with. And then also putting performance metrics in there, right? Showing if you're coaching and mentoring staff to take over project management functionalities and different types of functionalities, what does that look like? What skill set should they have at what period of time? And that will be in the IT Connect, like, contract to support the project going forward. And Nancy's talked about, she has various positions that they can hire for. Sometimes it may be a little bit difficult finding staff, but I told her I could participate in interviews. And sometimes you can see the potential people have, even if they don't have the skills already. Kind of really good at looking at, okay, they don't know this, but they're asking the right questions, right? They understand it. And really mentoring, because that's how I learned, right? People mentored and coached me. And I worked with contractors when I was an employee of state agency, but they transferred that knowledge over to me. And I've seen that in various, that's been asked. And so I wanted to make sure that that was included going forward.
Wonderful, thank you. And then Nancy, you may have some information on if these are positions that are already funded and unfilled, or are we talking needing to identify money for new FTEs?
Potentially both. I do have, currently right now, I do have 4 vacant positions that we have not purposely filled in the hopes that when we got a billing system, as Ms. Monroe said earlier, you have to potentially change, X into Y. So those positions, may have needed to be modified or upgraded or downgraded or, whatever. So I do have 4 of those positions that I do believe that we can, working through human resources and finance. They are currently budgeted. So I don't think the budget will be an issue unless, of course, we need to really reclassify one of the positions to a much higher level. Then we potentially would need to look at some budget. But yes, we do have 4. We should be able to start with that, relatively quickly. And then if something happens with the plan or as we're moving forward, then we also need to just, try and be prepared for that staffing level, and increasing or modifying or, changing it a little bit, and coming back and either asking for the creation of one or combining 2 to make one, or, something to that effect.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And that was public utilities, and I'm sorry, ITT, are we discussing? I know that we don't have Eric here right now, but maybe you have some awareness.
I can speak on a little bit of IT. They do have a current position out right now. I'm not sure when it closes, for the assistance for really throughout the whole city, IT integration or, some substance that IT would help perform with all of the departments. So there is one currently that he has sort of segmented, that would potentially be part of, assistance for utilities.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I I know that this is, a bit of I appreciate that there was a recognition that we needed to stop and get back on track, that things were not going the way that they needed to go, and not going on the timeline. I know that, as Sig mentioned, Counselor Lindell, excuse me, we are in formal setting. As Counselor Lindell mentioned, we've had a number of these conversations around extending, especially the Mountain River contract. And that goalpost kept getting moved further and further and further away. I am hopeful that Q1, maybe Q2 of 2026 is a reasonable goalpost, and we will not be continually pushing this project back. How confident do we feel in that? Because I know that really has been a source of contention in some of these conversations of saying this was supposed to be online at this time, it's been pushed back. I'd love to hear a little bit more about how we can have better reliance, better being able to stick to these timelines that have been put in place.
Yes, I have been in about 5 years worth of those conversations. So yes, I would love to be able to stand up here and say, yes, this is the deadline. I think I've said that probably 3 times over the last 5 years at least. So yeah, it's very frustrating. It's very disheartening for us to yet come again to, to another meeting. But I truly believe that we now have a project manager, have a program manager, have that foundation that we can at least build on and move forward. Again, it's a technological, undertaking. So I certainly want to hold to whatever deadline we finally come with, come forward in the next couple of months. I am optimistic that we can stick to that date. I don't right this second want to say, yes, it will be done, second quarter of 2026, only because we haven't gotten through some of those procurement, questions and concerns. So, and again, I'm not putting it on Travis, or anything like that. It's just, this is the process that we unfortunately have to go through, and just make sure that everybody's feet are to the fire and they understand how, serious this is. And we really do need to meet those milestones and those matrix and those, steps. And if we are sort of derailing ourselves, we need to be able to be grownups and, get back on that train and make sure that it doesn't, just completely fall off. So yes, I'm gonna let Miss Monroe add some more because she's gonna hold me and I will hold her. So we're hopefully going forward.
24 months for implementation is, been doing some research, is actually really good. But before I give you any dates and commit to any dates, I build a schedule from the implementation date backwards, right? And so for someone to say, oh, it could definitely be done in, 18 months or 24 months, and then the procurement is not completed until September, right? Now that date has shifted. So without giving you that date, I wanted to give you some data, right? But not dates. So the data is in 24, like once you sign that contract, then in 24 months, based on the tasks that we've outlined from implementation backwards, it should be able to be completed. So I wish I could say a date and comfortably give you a date, but from the procurement date and we sign a contract and start moving forward, 24 months is what we can bank.
Okay, wonderful. And I do appreciate that because I do think that providing that really level setting what that expectation should be on our end is very important. So I really appreciate that data point of really, we're not necessarily going to be able to pinpoint those months, but it should be approximately 24 months after procurement, after contract is signed. And I think that we have all seen enough to understand that always does not always go as quickly as we initially think it will. So thank you. That's a helpful for expectation setting there.
And I will follow up with that is Travis has been super helpful, available at all times.
Wonderful. I'm not surprised by that at all. He really is wonderful in many ways. Real fast, I know you mentioned some feedback from users. While I have y'all here, just did want to give some feedback from a constituent recently who had issue with utility billing. So as long as we're here, it'd be super speedy. I had a constituent, they had a leak, this is one of these leak scenarios. They had their bill on auto pay, and apparently auto pay turns off if your bill goes over $150 is what they told me, and they were unaware of this. Can I confirm?
I would definitely love to clarify that.
Sure, thank you.
Each customer sets their limit.
Okay,
On auto pay. So if their limit is 150, then yes, if the leak was $200 or $2,000, the auto pay would not take that payment.
okay. Oh, that's helpful.
So yeah, it might be a limit thing. You have my number. Please have them give me a call. We can get that looked at and straightened out. But yes, it is potentially, somebody may have a $2,000 water bill at some point.
Mhm.
If they don't have that limit, then it would take the $2,000. and
okay.
Probably hurt them in the long run
Great.
rather than, the 150 or whatever that they said it.
Okay, that's good to know. I don't think they were aware that they said that because they were very confused, and maybe it's not something they remembered. So, again, I'm glad that we'll be doing testing. Obviously, there are these different settings that you have to put in that maybe people read differently. So I'm sure that we'll go through those. But thank you for that clarification, because I was about to say if it's an auto 150 that we control, maybe we should not and let that be up to.
No, it is up to the customer.
Great. Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Those are all the questions. Again, thank you for this presentation. Ms. Monroe, thank you so much. I really have appreciated the way that you've presented and explained things. And I will say that you've given me a lot of confidence in this project just by the hour that we have now spent together. So really thank you so much for being here, and thank you, Nancy, as well. Glad to see this getting back on track. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you both. I know you're working hard on this. I think Nancy has always been working hard on this. And now I feel like we have the right team. I'm glad that we pulled back and up to take a deep look at how what was keeping us from success, because we did seem to just keep throwing more money at it. And clearly that wasn't helpful, because there were some underlying, as you say, foundational pieces that really had to be addressed in order to get to success, to get the house built, to use your analogy. So, I look forward to the day when this gets done. I'm sure Nancy does too. And, but really, really appreciate the teamwork that's going on now, and everything you both bring. So thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for being here tonight. You too. Thanks for joining us. No worries. We're good. You're here. Okie dokie. Think we are on to consent. Get back to my agenda. And we need to go to item E, which is request for approval of amendment number 1 to professional services contract item number 24-0112 with WSP USA Inc. for owner representative services to support infrastructure redevelopment at Midtown, to increase the not to exceed amount to $1 million annually. Interesting punctuation, including NMGRT, and to extend the term to December 31st, 2028. And we have a number of people here tonight, starting with our Public Works Director, Regina Wheeler. And I believe a couple of counselors pulled this item. I don't know which one of you. Counselor Lindell.
Thank you. So the memo on this came in February of 24, correct? Yes, March. The original contract. When was our original contract with this group?
Chair, Councilor Lindell, you're correct. I believe it was February when the original contract was let. And
Madam Chair, Councilor Lindell, I wonder if I could start with a little bit of a presentation for the context of this line of questioning. It might be really, really helpful. It's a really big, it's a bunch of information that I would very much like to share about this particular project and about the fact that we'll be building capacity and expertise inside Public Works in a very significant way over the next 6 months. And I think this might help answer the context, and then we could go to details like when the contract was, if that's okay.
Is that all right with you, Counselor? I think, having a little intro into this is probably a good idea.
That would be great. Thank you so much. I'd like to show a presentation. I've got this little, should I plug it into the HDMI here? So thank you so much, Madam Chair, Councilor Lindell. I'm trying to bring up the Midtown update that Karen Iverson and I just brought to governing body. Basically, what you're seeing here with the WSP contract is the city and Public Works establishing the expertise and the capacity that we need to manage this extremely complicated project. Thank you so much, Councilor Lindell, for making that visible, because it's actually going to get more complicated in my slides than this one. So I'll just start over. What this contract does is it does what you've seen Public Works doing over the years, which is to increase the capacity and the expertise of staff in order to successfully manage complicated projects. Much like the last presenters, this project is actually probably 10 times more complicated. It's the redevelopment of an existing campus. It has antiquated existing infrastructure. In order to redevelop it according to the guidelines that will be held to in the development agreements with numerous developers. So there'll be different commitments to different developers over time. The city will be committed to achieving certain milestones of infrastructure development, will be responsible for reviewing developers' infrastructure development plans. We're responsible for managing the complete renovation and replacement of most of the existing infrastructure, including electrical, sewer, water, roadways, stormwater. This project includes designing parks and open space and roadways, new entrances, multimodal capacity, including potential transit integration. It involves land use entitlements where there's platting required and lot lines. All of these things are far outside of the scope of what Public Works normally does when we say redevelop a road, when we even reconstruct a road, even like Guadalupe would maybe be, 1/10 of what this project is presenting to us. So it's absolutely critical that from the beginning, and we realized this when back in February, when the DDA agreements were already being negotiated and they were asking Public Works for timelines and when will you have this done? And so we brought in WSP at that time using a CES contract. They have expertise in redevelopment, so they knew what questions to ask. They knew what kinds of things we'd have to begin to grapple with that Public Works doesn't even normally do that on a daily basis. So lacking expertise and certainly lacking capacity. We don't have a project manager on staff or two. As the last presenters indicated, they feel like their utility billing project is a one full-time project manager. This is probably two, maybe three. Having WSP on contract gives us that capacity to increase project management. So right now, we have one project manager really full-time and some scheduler work, and we have some document repository work and some other expertise available to us. Here's the second part of this first phase one infrastructure that we've committed to undertaking already. It's at least a $30 million construction project. This is 3 times the size of anything that we're doing right now, which makes it, it is significant. And it also means that we have to do this right. We have to take all of these minutia details into account as we start launching into spending millions of dollars on this infrastructure, both in design and in construction. This is exactly the slides that we presented to governing body at the last update. One of the really important things that WSP has helped us put together is a critical path schedule. What are all the dependencies? What has to happen first? We're running into things right now where Midtown wants to bring forward a new plat so that they can allow developers to move forward and understand what's going to be developed where. Well, there's buildings on the lot lines. Sam and Tim are managing a huge amount of this project, things like they'll manage demolitions. They're managing, dealing with P&M and the electrical infrastructure. But how does that tie together with our spine infrastructure, the roads we build, the roads we design, joint use trenches, getting utilities to all the sites? It's extremely complicated. And so that's the first thing. It's really important that we have the expertise and the capacity on hand to make sure that we deliver Midtown well. And it became apparent to us right away as soon as economic development turned to us and said, okay, well, when will the infrastructure be done? We're like, oh my God, this is such a big question. It's a much bigger question than it might sound like. The other part of the answer to the question is this. We are pending right now from the state $42.5 million of capital money in the form of 51 agreements that will be coming through. So we're really taking a look at this demand, and some of these have urgency for deploying the capital. And so it's really important that we in Public Works be responsible for the fact that not only do we have this huge and important project Midtown that we want to deploy those funds really properly and make sure we meet commitments to developers and realize all of these visions for the community that are articulated in the development and the master plan, but we also have to meet all of these commitments that we've made to the state and to the community for deploying these resources. So you will be seeing a lot of contracts coming through to augment the expertise and the capacity of staff. Of course, staff oversees all of these consultants, right? So, we're in every weekly meeting. We're making sure that the critical path schedule is updated, that everything's being thought of, that we're in action. We have a ton of administrative burden with all of this and Midtown as well, which we're also working on building that capacity. So I just wanted to take the opportunity of your having asked this question to provide some context, both about Midtown and the world that we are in right now with deploying capital resources and being successful on complex projects. So thank you so much, Councilor Lindell, for your indulgence, and I'll be happy to answer more specific questions.
All right, back to you, Councilor Lindell.
That certainly helps. So we did a contract in February for $90,000 with this group, correct?
That's correct.
But that didn't come to the council or to finance.
That's correct, because that is on the city manager's authority.
I get it. But what bothers me is that we did a $90,000 contract and now we want an amendment for $4 million. Why didn't we do an all-inclusive, let's talk about the details, let's delve into this before we jumped into an agreement with this group that now, that was like this. Now we're looking for an amendment like this. That's what bothers me.
Thank you so much for that question, Councilor Lindell. The reason that happened was because we were faced with Midtown needing dates and information from us that we could not provide. The RFPs were released into the public and early negotiation agreements signed before infrastructure even had our feet on the ground. We had no idea of there was no MRA director when those RFPs went out, and infrastructure had no definition of what was happening. So what we did was we actually did do some procurement through the CES contractors of determining who had the expertise and the capacity to really help us. We brought those in using the ways that we could to make sure that we weren't violating procurement rules. And we've gone through it step by step to get to you here with this, but it was because the project was in action before we were ready to give them what they needed. Those DDA, the DDA is trying to be signed now within the next couple of months, and they need dates. They're going to promise the developer that we're going to develop spine infrastructure by a certain date. And we had to get in action quickly to give them that information and that. And so we did work with purchasing to say, okay, we can do it up to $60,000 PO, then we could do a contract that the city manager can sign, and then we can amend it for the whole scope of the project. But we did know we were coming this far. It was actually foreshadowed in the FIR of the development plan when that was approved. It shows you what staff thought we would need to expend every year in order to deploy that development plan, and the expense for this contractor is in that FIR.
Counselor, can you speak into your mic?
I'm sorry. Did we put out an RFP for this?
Thank you so much for that question as well, Councilor Lindell, Madam Chair. We actually had started on an engineering RFP almost a year ago. It's taken almost a year to get that RFP done, and those contracts will be coming through. That's for engineering and professional services. We're also putting out an RFP for project management and owner representative services, because we need a lot more help than just this team on Midtown. We need help on all of our parks projects. We need help on all of our roads projects. So that RFP is getting started. We're hoping it'll be completed in 6 months. But for this, we really didn't have the time to take 6 to 9 months for an RFP. And the good news is we found a firm that's really delivering for us and has great expertise in this area, and will really help us deliver Midtown. We've almost always used CES. CES are pre-procured vendors by another cooperative procurement agency, right? So it's not a sole source with them. They do get procured by a competitive procurement process.
I want you to know that I don't think that this is necessarily that we're on the wrong path. I don't like the process. I mean, we're backed into a corner now of agreeing to a $4 million amendment to a contract to a vendor that we never even RFP'd. That
Madam Chair, just to correct, actually, you're not committing to $4 million. This is an on-call contract. And as services are needed at Midtown for reviewing technical information or helping us with this critical path schedule and managing subcontractors doing design, then the purchase orders will be issued. So you're not committing to $4 million, and the governing body would always approve any appropriations and budgeting that would be used against this contract. So there wouldn't be there's no allocation of funds to this contract without governing body's approval.
well, I thought that we were approving an amendment up to $4 million.
It's up to $1 million a year for 4 years, and it's on call. So as services are required, they'll be procured. So the vendor is given a scope of work. They provide a quotation to staff. That packet is submitted to the procurement office to issue a PO. We don't expect it to necessarily be $1 million a year, but over the next 4 years, we're gonna be doing a lot of super complicated things, things that aren't even on our critical path schedule yet. Include like what happens with Tract O, and what about the infrastructure there? Are there easements? Is there, what's the utility situation there? We have new entrances to the campus we have to design. So we'll have the capacity, and we won't be in the situation that we were earlier this year where we needed capacity and expertise and didn't have it. So this sets up infrastructure for us to be able to deploy the project. It's not a commitment to $1 million a year.
Well, they say that they are doing planning, design, and construction management.
That's correct.
And through here, I see them, I don't have the term in front of me. They are
Owner representative project manager. We already have 4 contracts for owner representative project managers that are serving the city really well. We've had them for 3 years. We set them up 3 years ago, all of us together who were here. They include Leroy Pacheco, who is managing Arroyo de los Chamisos Crossing project for us. Some example of an owner representative type of work would be that he engaged as the project manager for the project in initial conversations with the rodeo grounds on potential encroachment and needs for right-of-way acquisition with that organization. So in that way, he's acting as an owner representative project manager. In this particular case, WSP has represented the city and Public Works in conversations about on the DDA negotiations. Because there's a lot of conversation about, when can the city get the infrastructure done? Or, do I really have to comply with a stormwater infrastructure utility that isn't even designed yet? And so it's very complex and high level, all the way down to the nuts and bolts of managing a critical path schedule.
I realize that we need desperately these services. We don't have the capacity. I don't know that, we probably don't have the expertise that this company has, but there's something about this process that doesn't sit well with me. In here, they talk about the MRA. How far along with that are we?
Madam Chair, Counselor Lindell, I'm not the MRA director. Do meet with the MRA director. I mean, I'm not sure how to answer that question. Do you have a more specific aspect?
MRA director.
Karen Iverson?
So she is the director.
That's correct.
In here, in this narrative, it talks about a whole new division of the city being established. What does that mean?
I'm sorry, can you be more specific? And the contract was actually very carefully written for Midtown, and I think what you'll see throughout the contract, and that was written by the city attorney's office, it took them probably a month and a half to write this contract, actually, which has caused part of the delay in getting it here, but they wanted to really carefully distinguish the roles and responsibilities of this project administrator owner rep from Daniel Hernandez's project manager role. And it is very distinct. And so what you'll see in there is that the MRA director and or the Public Works director can direct this consultant. And we had originally envisioned that the MRA would take the whole Midtown redevelopment project and use these project managers and run the project. And Public Works would only be involved from a perspective of as developers submitted their development plans or as designs for this spine infrastructure came forward, we would review as we normally do. But it's been decided that Public Works will own the infrastructure redevelopment, so that there is room for the MRA director to be the leader or owner of these services as well.
I think it says in here that they'll initially report to you, and then once the MRA is established, they'll be reporting to the director. So does that take you out of the governance here?
Madam Chair, Councilor Lindell, it's a real close partnership between MRA director and I, and it always will have to be. The MRA director is owning all the development agreements and bless you, Sam, and the activation work and the entitlements. And I mean, and the establishment of the MRA and the seating of all of the commissioners and all of that process. I mean, there's just a huge amount of work associated with this. So the MRA director and I are very closely tied, as are Sam and Tim, since they're also operating the campus, supporting the lessees. They'll be managing anything that has to happen with stabilization, building renovation, moving staff, demolition, remediation, and the gas loop and the electric loop. So it's a big team effort, and we're all working very closely together.
So page 9 in the packet where it says, under governance, the city intends to establish a metropolitan redevelopment agency to administer metropolitan redevelopment area. This isn't it. As a division of the city. Do I consider the MRA a division of the city?
Madam Chair, Counselor Lindell, I think that's not an inappropriate consideration. It does report into Rich Brown in the Community Development Department. And so as a sub-director, just as in Public Works, you have Director Burnett is a division in Public Works. I think the MRA would be well to be considered as a division. The City Attorney's Office wrote the language in the contract. So I think they feel comfortable that that's an appropriate designation.
Have we established the MRA?
Madam Chair, Counselor Lindell, I think partly you have a director, but you don't have the commissioners yet, right? There's a lot of pieces to that whole puzzle. The MRA too has some work to do as far as funding all of the infrastructure and other improvements, and that'll be through potential tax increment financing, and that'll be work. So I think it's just beginning to be established. Not fully established would be, I think, a fair characterization.
So where does Mr. Hernandez fit into this at this point?
Madam Chair, Counselor Lindell, he doesn't fit into this. He's working for Karen, and I'm actually not exactly sure of his role. I'm sorry, I can't answer that question.
Yeah, that's on page 12 in our packet. They do talk about, they will be helping with the tax increment funding.
Madam Chair, Counselor Lindell, the WSP did provide a white paper to Karen on potential approaches and benefits of a tax increment financing, but there will be further work on that. I think it's a pretty big piece of work. This team can contribute, but the MRA director may also choose different resources, different professionals to support the work on that.
WSP will report to Regina Wheeler until a formal governance structure of the program is established. After the MRA is established and its director on board, WSP would report to that director. I just want to call that out so that we know that's what they're saying.
Thank you.
So of the original 150,000, which I think that the contract for the 150,000 basically looks like the same contract for $1 million a year, which now we weren't going to get what was in that contract for $150,000. That seemed like foolishness, really. What have we gotten for $150,000? And do we have any outstanding billing from them at this point?
Thank you, Madam Chair, Counselor Lindell, for that question. Everything that I have shown you, the critical path schedule, the items that need to be completed, WSP has been basically leading the way and leading this project as far as identifying what are the predecessors, what needs to be done, what needs to be done next, how long might it take. That's how come we have a critical path schedule and are beginning to move forward on actual development. They also did the white paper on the TIF. They've done a bunch of research about funding because the construction phase of this is wildly roughly estimated at $30 million. And that construction funding, they did a research paper on that for us. So they've been taking notes at our weekly project meetings. We have actually had them stand down while we were waiting for this contract. Like you said, the $150,000 contract was the full-blown contract, but because Midtown needed to move and we needed to support the ENAs that had already been entered, we had to keep moving, and we were able to, we think, confidently commit to the terms right now that are being developed for the DDAs. So we've gotten this work that you see here. We've brought other pieces of our work forward to the governing body, and so we do have outstanding billing from the company right now.
So have we used up the 150?
Yes, Madam Chair, Councilor Lindell.
We've used up the 150 and we still have outstanding billing?
That's correct. Not ideal, but I feel like the priority to keep it, we could have stopped Midtown and said we're unable to support the pursuit of the DDAs, but I think that wasn't what would have been preferred. In fact, in a meeting today, I said, until I have a project manager, I can't have this conversation, and that was really not well received. We've made commitments to the community with the RFPs, and I guess I could take responsibility for not having realized that this was going to fall to Public Works, and that I could have told you if I had known that we didn't have the expertise and the capacity to do it, but I didn't foresee it until it was sitting on our lap.
When do we expect that the MRA will be completed?
Madam Chair, Councilor Lindell, I can't answer that question, but what I can say for you is that we will continue to be in close partnership, and Public Works will support the infrastructure development. I believe, I was going to mention, we're in this project for 20 years for you. So irregardless of this or that, I mean, Public Works is going to definitely be a major driver, contributor, supporter, and realizer of infrastructure for Midtown for the next 20 years. And this is just the beginning.
You said that they had done cost estimates?
Well, rough cost estimates. We've all participated in the charrette. I think, it's just sort of a wild, you can see here, this is what was presented to governing body at the last quarterly update. And you'll see there's a rough estimate. We base that on a mile of road right now is costing, close to 15 to 20 million, depending on what you've got in there. And so, if you've got 2 miles of road, then this is what it might be. That doesn't count developing the plaza that's here. This is a big piece of work. We're responsible for all of this open space, which will be stormwater management infrastructure. We've picked out a piece of the infrastructure that's needed for phase 1, but this isn't all the infrastructure. And there'll be a lot more to do, and we'll need to be holding all these pieces together and making sure that while we spend a lot of money on this project over the next 20 years, every penny is towards value and not towards having to rip up the floor because we forgot the radiant heat, like the previous presenter said.
This is going to be our new analogy.
A rough estimate of 30 million. You just said that a mile of roadway is 15 or 20?
Guadalupe is over 12 million itself.
I don't think 30 million touches this project. I'm not an estimator, but I can pretty much guarantee that we're going to be way past 30 million. And it concerns me that we may be underestimating numbers.
Madam Chair, Councilor Lindell, the good news I have on that particular count, because you are correct, we don't know what the number is. The good news I have for you on that is that because the legislature has really supported this project as well, we're funded probably through design. Design, as we can see on this critical path schedule, is currently scheduled, and this hasn't been updated in a month and a half because we haven't had our owner rep project manager on board. We had them stand down. currently scheduled to be completed on the 31st of March 2026. So March 2026. So in 2 years, we'll know the number for sure. By the time we're at 50% design, maybe a little bit 3/4 of the way through that, we'll be able to get some early estimates. So as we move into the design phase, we'll get much better visibility into what those infrastructure construction costs will be.
On page 21 in the packet, under D, assumptions, it says EOR is responsible for performing QC/QA on all deliverables prior to submitting to city and WSP. What does that mean?
Engineer of record. Sorry, that's a funny little thing. And what that means is that because we need the expertise and the capacity that the engineer of record, of course, has to review their submittals, but then WSP will also review them for us as well. They'll be responsible to help us make sure that the engineers, and there'll probably be multiple engineers in the next phase. When we move into design, we expect to have one team possibly doing parks and open space, and another team doing the spine infrastructure. We may have some stormwater design professionals separate, or they may be included in those. So there'll be a lot of work packages, design products to review and make sure they're thorough, meet all of the needs, incorporate all of the information, and are correct.
So this is going to be a lot of work for this company. They have people that live here, work here, or do they always have to come in from somewhere else?
Madam Chair, Councilor Lindell, thank you for that question. They have both. There's the more senior people do live elsewhere. We have had one of the vice presidents here a couple of times that you've met, Manjeet. He has a house in Tucson and comes through here regularly. They have some stormwater people that live here. It's just not that important, actually, that they're physically here for us. It's all about reviewing documents, being on the, we have all of our project team meetings on the web so that we can take notes and look at maps and look at the critical path schedule and pull up documents. And so it's been completely seamless having them both here and remote.
On page 116 of the packet, it's the insurance, and I don't really know about $1 million in liabilities for this size and type of project, and the work that they're doing seems extraordinarily low.
Madam Chair, Councilor Lindell, it is important to note that this is not the engineer. This is the project manager. So the engineer it's a really good point that you bring up, and we can really look and make sure that we're having the right number there as we bring the engineer contracts forward.
Doing a lot of documents that could lead to a lot of problems. Seems to me like 2 million is nothing in liability for a project. I mean, I carry $1 million and I got nothing going on. I'm not even shoveling gravel in my driveway. It just strikes me that that is an exceedingly low amount of insurance to have.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Councilor Lindell. I think particularly for the engineers, because even if the engineer will hold the liability for a failed design. And so I think it's a really great point that you bring up, that as we move forward to the engineering contracts, that we might want to consider, what that insurance level is. That is the standard by state law for these contracts. And I'm sure they could cover more. We do pay for that. If we ask for more insurance, of course, for whatever they're carrying, we pay for. But I think the engineer certainly, and we use these engineers all the time. I mean, the Guadalupe engineer that designed that project, I'm sure had a $2 million liability insurance. That's our standard term, but we can take a look and see if that's appropriate for the engineers moving forward.
those are really all the questions I have. Just don't like the process of this. I'd like to have us not do this again. $150,000 contract or 90,000, whatever it was, that then gets a $4 million amendment doesn't sit well. To be a very competent firm. I would have loved it if we could have done a little bit more selection rather than just, I mean, I see that they did a sizable project in Albuquerque. Perhaps Karen's already worked with them. I just don't love the process of how this has come to us on a bunch of different levels. I realize that we absolutely need capacity and the expertise that Public Works cannot take this on. So, but I think I've made my point.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Cassett.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I agree with Councilor Lindell that this really struck me of coming into such a large amendment. I think the question that I have left, because covered it very thoroughly, Councilor Lindell, thank you, really has to do with looking at, there are so many different players and there seems to be all these different overlaps, and keeping it straight what the job is of Director Iverson, of Lee Logston, of Daniel Hernandez, of Wilson and Company, of WSP, of whoever else is on here that I'm unaware of, Rich Brown. Understanding what this matrix looks like and why, I think is, has not, it's a little bit piecemeal. It probably makes sense to whoever's running this, which at this point, I'm not even, I mean, who's running? Like, who is the point person for Midtown? Is it Director Iverson at this juncture? Okay, good. That was my guess. So glad
Madam
at least
Chair,
of that.
Councilor Cassett, yes, it's Director Iverson is the leader of the project.
Great.
And I think we consider Director Brown as the executive sponsor.
Great. Okay, wonderful. But I think getting maybe a graphic, a map, something that helps us to understand who all the players are, what are our staff doing, what are city staff doing, especially those city staff that are directly assigned to Midtown, and that is it, that's their job. And understanding what that is looking like, as well as all these different contractors and why they're coming into play. Are we replicating? Do we need, we've seen this film before where we have contractors managing contractors. Didn't go great last time. We saw this with the audit a few years back. So I think really understanding what this looks like and why, how much money are we spending? Is this something that we do need multiple contractors for? Could one contractor be doing all of this work and make things, more simplified and streamlined? I'm just having a really hard time understanding and keeping track of all these different pieces, where the money is going and why. I understand that that's probably not a question that you can fully answer at this moment because you have this slice. But I suppose I am putting it out there. I will reach out to Director Brown to have this conversation as well. But this was just another moment where I saw all of these pieces in their scope of work that I thought was being covered by other people. Like the parcelization, Wilson and Company is doing that, is my understanding. That was given to them. The DDA and a lot of these components that seem to be being headed up by Daniel Hernandez. If I understand that there's probably different expertise that needs to go into each segment of this. And so understanding that there might be, this component that WSP brings to the table, but at this point, they seem to be coming on as the owner representative project manager, as was stated, Definitely for Public Works, but it sounds like that's kind of creeping into some other areas is how I'm understanding this. Am I correct there?
Yes, Madam Chair, Counselor Casa, it's a great point that you make, and I guess that is, we'd be happy to provide you with a chart. It's actually not that complicated. It's super duper clear to all of us that are in the project. And everybody's playing a huge and important role in doing really good work. Wilson's doing excellent work with the parcelization, but maybe this will help you understand. So as Wilson does their parcelization work, they put lines through the existing buildings. That causes land use to have to say, well, you can't plat with a line through an existing building, and you either need to condemn or demolish. And then Sam comes in and has to say, well, what will it take to do that? Or can that be done? Or no, actually it's leased to Apple, so we can't actually demolish. So the DDA has all of these terms of committing to infrastructure. It commits to when we'll have spine infrastructure done. It commits to when we'll have a design for infrastructure done. It commits to what kind of entrances those developers will do. And so we really need a project, infrastructure. That's what I think it's distinct about WSP is they're the infrastructure owner representative project manager, while Daniel, and as I said, city attorney's office took over a month and a half of this contract very carefully. Daniel's and this one side by side to make sure they're very clear and distinct, understanding that there will have to be mutual involvement in like the DDA. Because while there are also business terms and deals, there's also infrastructure terms and deals. So there is a lot of overlap. And then and I just, yeah, so those are the two big, the parcelization has been complex. We've been working on, we've had a draft of that now probably for a month, because we do have to move the lines around, and then there's land use implications of where you put the line. And then is there subsequent sequential sub-parcelization, which is a problem. And so it really is an all hands on deck, super complicated situation. And we'd be happy to, I think it's a great idea to give a graphic of the roles that are being played and try to represent better how they interact, because we'll be in this complicated process for quite a while. We've got two ENAs on the table already, right? So for the Visual Arts Center, which is a whole different ballgame that we haven't even started. And then for film, and we'll continue to be sort of supporting each other and the council and the governing body to get to that finish line, which is desired, which is a developed campus with well-invested money and fair returns from the developers, and meeting all of our requirements that are put into those DDAs.
Okay, wonderful. I mean, I would appreciate that. I'm glad to hear that it's clear to everybody who's in those rooms. We are not. So definitely getting that graphic, that understanding, you know, what's the importance of all these different contractors, you know, that they're not replicating services. And that this is, you know, that this is an expensive project. And I have, you know, been one that has said, you know, we need to invest in this, we need to invest in this because it is incredibly important. Of course, you know, to my district, where it resides, and the neighbors, and just what has been promised, and the potential of Midtown. But I don't want to invest any more than is needed in order to reach those goals that we have put out. So having a better understanding, having that be very clear, so that when contracts like this are coming forward, why they are necessary and what gaps they are filling is much more apparent on the surface, because right now it feels very, very murky. And with that, I think I will yield the floor.
Counselor Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the dialogue. I think that this has gotten to a point where, well, it seems like we're almost at some point, I see put the cart before the horse. And now we're backtracking. And kind of like we saw in the last discussion and presentation, we're having to go, and I think it's smart to identify the fact that we need this type of process or this type of individual or this entity in place, because you know, this is an important project, and it's the city has committed to move forward and to invest in this, it almost seems to be like it's becoming the black hole in the center of Santa Fe. And I don't want it to be that. I think that the return in the future years will be tremendous and it will be great. But I want to take the analogy of too many irons in the fire. You got to be careful because you have too many irons in the fire and you're going to get burned. And I think that these are great questions that have been brought forward and great cause for concern. I want to just make a statement that, you know, I know we are looking at 1 million per year, which basically by approving this, yes, we are committing to $4 million. I know that you may not use it all, but the very likelihood that you will use it all and you may come back for more money. At that point, we're talking, okay, what's going on here? Why are we asking for more? Continue, where do we stop and where do we identify that, you know? And so on the one hand, this looks like it is the right way to go. But I think we need to be very diligent and keeping our eyes on how it's working. The spine infrastructure of this area is probably one of the most important things, the foundation of how this will work in the future. And so I think it's something that we can't mess up with. We can't go back and re-dig everything up and put it back together. I just, mostly comments, not many questions. They were all asked by my colleagues and I appreciate that dialogue. And so, again, it's real money, even though we may look at it as being brought from previous years or where capital money, capital outlay. Taking a look at that list that you have with all of the capital projects that are, I mean, it's a lot. And, you know, we want to make sure that we are able to come forward in the future and administer all of these projects in good, timely manner and make sure that they are, because they're all assets to the community. And it is tough. It's tough when you're running lean and mean. And I do get that. And yet I think we have the responsibility of identifying, you know, when we're, when to cut it, you know, when it's irresponsible to go forward with things. And so, again, I appreciate the dialogue, not many questions in regards to this, but I think that it really is important for the community and those who we represent that we are looking at this and making sure that it's going to be successful. And so, mostly comments. I appreciate the time. Yield the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Thank you, Counselors Lindell and Cassett, for pulling this item so we could have this presentation. Thank you for the questions so that we could better understand what's happening here. I think this, together with the presentation that Director Iverson gave at the governing body meeting, is helpful in beginning to understand the complexity. I mean, I think we've always known this is a complex project, and as we get into it, we I think are all understanding just how deep that complexity is. And so having these presentations, I think, is very helpful, and you know, maybe the additional information that's been asked for, just so we can stay up to speed with all of you. And the contractor, WSP, you know, the packet got huge write-up on who they are, what they do. They do look very competent. And I sort of compare this to what CLA has done for us for the audits. They're bringing that outside capacity and expertise to help us with a really big project and to get on the right track. And I think, you know, obviously getting on the right track at the beginning is what we need to do. And I appreciate, you know, everybody internally sort of identifying that we can't do this ourselves. And I think we're lucky to have folks internally that can find the expertise that we need. And so I'm hopeful that this group will bear out all of that. And I'm sure we'll have hiccups along the way, but again, hopefully we're putting together the right team, the right support. I do agree the contract was a little strange coming in as 90,000, and then there's an immediate contract amendment that is odd. Definitely flags our attention, as you can see. So yeah, well, I also sort of see why it happened the way it did, but not really ideal. So would echo that sentiment. Do we have a motion? I'll move to approve. Second. We have a motion and a second to approve this item. I believe we need a roll call.
Certainly, Madam Chair. Counselor Cassett,
Yes.
Counselor Lindell, Counselor Garcia,
Yes.
Chair Romero Worth.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right. Thank you all for being here tonight. Appreciate it. All right. We do not have any action items. We do not have an executive session. Matters from staff.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to remind the committee that we resume budget hearings tomorrow at 1 p.m. here in the council chambers. And we will be hearing the budget recommendations for the Community Development Department and General Government.
Okay. And then matters from the committee. Matters from the chair. So our next regular meeting is Monday, May 6th. But as Director Oster has just described, we will be together again tomorrow afternoon. So see you all then. Thank you.